Every single person reads things differently. Any given person reading any given art piece will inevitably come to a unique conclusion. This is true throughout all varieties of art: games, comics, movies, and just about anything else. It's my understanding that, with no exceptions, everybody's beliefs about a piece of media, whether influenced by brand, medium, genre, or whatever else, inherently change their interpretation of said piece of media. We can see this all around us in fiction. One example of this is in the Shrek films. Many don't view these films with much of a critical lens. They tend to see these as dumb kids' movies. This is similar, although not entirely the same, as a deconstructionist lens. In this lens, a text is seen as meaningless because language is meaningless. This, while the reasoning is probably different, could be compared to how most people see these films. The difference being it tends to be subconscious when people get this opinion about Shrek, whereas deconstructionist is carefully considered by people who have that lens. This contrasts against those who see this film under an archetypal lens. An archetypal lens focuses on the tropes within media, such as selfless hero. People using this lens have expectations that, when broken, change their interpretation of these films. For example, Shrek's progression in the first film is from an ogre who seems happy alone, although only on a surface level does this hold true, into a character who learns how to accept his inherent value and worth, represented by him expressing his feelings towards Fiona. Throughout most of this film, we see the character of Shrek defying expectations of what a hero should be. He's lonely, he's selfish, he doesn't care for others. Only at the end does this change. During the events of Shrek II, we see this arc continue logically. We see Shrek still feeling like he's not good enough for Fiona, breaking our expectations of the last film's happily ever after. This is highlighted by his choice to become human. This leads naturally from the last film because we see Shrek doubt himself. The film goes through a lot of effort to show that the character change in the last film still happened. Despite showing his shame, Shrek is accepting of the love of those around him, and is much friendlier with the fairy tale creatures. Again, this breaks expectations of what an ogre is in a fantasy story. This highlights that this is the same Shrek, and he really grew from the first film. Yet another lens this film could be seen under is the biographical lens, where you focus on the life of the writer. Someone who knows the history of the writers may tend to see it under this lens. Many at DreamWorks came to Disney and were frustrated with the CEO, Michael Eisner. This led to them leaving to work on DreamWorks. The character of Farquaad is intentionally designed to mock Eisner. Many complaints about Eisner came out in his character. His short stature, attitude, and ego were all based on Eisner. His name was Farquaad because it was the closest they could get to saying fuckwad in a family film. Looking at all these readings of this film, it's clear that people can get multiple types of meanings out of this. Their interpretations of the text and derived importance thereof strongly impact each other. It's clear that the common semi-deconstructionist view is that there's not much meaning at all. Contrastingly, in the archetypal perspective, we see the way the film plays with the expectations of the viewer. Even in the biographical reading, we see another interpretation of the story as a parallel to the worker's experience with Disney. It's not just films that are like this either. I see why many may dismiss this game. It's a hard game to play. I'm not just talking about difficulty when I say that, but to many, this game's emotional core resonates with them deeply, and it becomes a very personal experience in the way it can play with them. It's clear that these two lenses have a strong contrast. Gwenpool is a comic character and series created by Marvel. In this, I'll be specifically talking about the first run of Unbelievable Gwenpool. This comic surrounds the character of Gwenpool, a person who lived in a world much like ours, where superheroes only existed in comic books. After being sent to the Marvel Universe, she has to realize the hardships of the world and grow into a better person. If you view this comic with an archetypal lens, you start to see the tropes that are common in comic books and how it's subverted here. When you read a comic book, you expect a few things, especially with a superhero comic book. You expect the heroes to win in the end, you expect death to be temporary, and you expect the heroes to be cool characters. Gwenpool seeks to break all your beliefs about comics. In this story, Gwenpool ends up repeatedly losing. Her only friend is killed off early on as well. She joins a villain team, defying expectations of her being a hero. She repeatedly makes assumptions about how the world should work. Her assumptions parallel the reader's. She assumes that the world will work out for her since she got her own series, and that's how comic books usually work. She assumes she'll have an extravagant life. We see time and time again as her expectations are crushed. Even the conclusion of her series does this. Around the end, Gwenpool is desperately trying to not get her series cancelled, to somehow prove that she is important enough for her series to continue. She figures out how long her series has left. With this, she begins to freak out, not wanting it to end. Scared that when the series ends, herself and her friends will be passed over to another writer, meaning she won't ever see them again. At least not as they are now. In the end, she uses her last few panels to live a full life and restore her confidence, saying that she'll appear again in crossovers and a new series. This can also be read with a psychological perspective. In a psychological perspective, you tend to focus on the motivations of the character and why they're doing what they're doing. People who come in with this lens tend to be looking for some intellectual value in the writing and tend to like well-written characters. Someone using this lens may look at Gwenpool and see the existentialist view of the world, a character who has evidence of some magical rule set to the universe and understands it deeply based on her knowledge, but comes in conflict when she realizes the world doesn't care about her. In this way, Gwenpool can be read as a coming-of-age story. Throughout this comic, whether you view it with an archetypal lens or as a coming-of-age story with this psychological lens, it's clear you get a very unique and personal meaning out of it. Throughout this, we have seen these three texts interpreted in many ways. Whether we're viewing Shrek with an archetypal lens or reading Gwenpool with a psychological lens, believe me when I say, any person's beliefs can give them drastically different ideas of the meanings of the text. I'm sure you can see similar ideas in what you enjoy. I believe that everyone has something where they see meaning where others may not. These personal meanings are important to understanding who you are. I hope I have shown you these very different perceptions that can arise from the same text.